I worked for this organization, and there was a particular person at this organization. She was one of the most productive employees in our office. As far as all the areas in which they would measure productivity, she topped the list at all of them. She was a baller. So, naturally, she was promoted to manage other people because she was so productive and so good at her job. So she gets into a management role. She starts with one direct report. That person quits within a month or two. She gets another direct report. That person quits within a couple weeks. Throughout the course of 1 year, she turns through 7 or 8 direct reports. They all quit. Reason being, she would shame people for not doing things correctly. She didn't know how to listen, so it demonstrated she cared and respected the other person. She did not know how to receive feedback without getting defensive, and she sure as hell didn't know how to run a meeting. Well, folks, that is the Peter Principle. This sounds like a stupid question.
Probably is, because, yeah, go ahead. Skilled managers equals high morale, which equals all that cool stuff that you cannot pay for and you can't punish for.
When you close off that feedback channel, you are not going to be able to hear the truth.
In the first microseconds, your brain can't tell the difference between physical danger and what we call social danger.
I mean, I'm pissed off at you.
Me, specifically?
Well, just because you're my boss and all.
Employees tend to get promoted until they reach their level of incompetence. Go forward and don't suck. Hey, I'm Mike Nash.
And I am the younger Nash, Ethan Nash.
And this is the Managing with Mind and Heart podcast,
where our job is to help managers not suck.
Exactly.
Mike, Dad.
Yes, son, Ethan.
What did we talk about last episode as it does pertain to what we will talk about in this episode?
Well, we started our very first episode of our very first podcast ever with morale.
Exciting.
Yep. And the general idea, of course, is that, well, first of all, we established that morale really, really matters because if people have high morale, they're more willing to volunteer their brain and their heart.
Mm-hmm. And just to give a quick rundown of last week's episode, in a little more detail, we talked about what you get when you have low morale, which is a lot of ugly things, turnover, employees coming in late to work,
bad attitudes, junior high behaviors,
lack of teamwork. And then we talked about what you get when you have high morale in the workplace, which is all the really happy and good things that we do want, such as
creativity.
I
just said that. Creativity.
Mind and heart, behaviors and actions. You get people working together as a team. You have better customer service.
You get much better employee engagement, which is that magic thing that we're always looking for.
And creativity.
Yeah, creativity as well.
And from there, we talked about the 4 sources of morale, which are...
Number 1, well, let's start from the top this time. The number 1 big source, of course, is managers, leaders. The way managers behave, the way leaders show up.
Makes up roughly 65% of the morale picture.
Yep. Next one down was the work itself.
Makes up roughly 20% or so.
So more or less.
Yeah. And then the other one is... the coworkers, your coworkers.
Right. The people I work with impact my morale. And then the last one, the smallest one, although it seems like it should be pretty significant, is each person brings their own capacity for morale to the workplace. The reason that one was so low, of course, is because we're not talking about personal happiness. We're talking about workplace morale.
So those are the 4 sources of morale. Mike.
Yeah.
Dad.
Son. Ethan.
I'm going to take a quick sip of my mushroom coffee because I live in Seattle now and I'm quite hipster like that.
You enjoy your coffee, dude. And I'll tell you that for this episode, folks, we are going to be continuing with this topic of morale. We're going to talk about how to get high morale, how to maintain high morale, where morale actually comes from.
That sounds good to me. So where does it come from?
Well, let's go back to our formula from last time. We know that the number one source of morale is managers and leaders. Now, here's the thing. That's the source of morale, either high or low, right? The source of morale, whether it's higher morale or low morale, comes from leadership. Again, somewhere between 50% and 80% of people who leave their job, they're not really quitting their job, they're quitting their boss. Mm-hmm. So what I need to hone in on here is how do you develop a management team that's going to create a high morale work environment? Now, here's the answer. It's not just leaders and managers that create high morale, meaning the existence of leaders. What we're saying is it's leaders and managers with a specific skill set. It's skilled managers. In fact, here's the formula that we kind of end our morning with when we're doing our workshops at the various clients that we work at. It would be skilled managers equals high morale, which equals all that cool stuff that you cannot pay for and you can't punish for.
So you're talking about skilled managers here, and let's talk about that skilled piece, because when I hear skilled, I'm thinking, okay, if you are a manager of accounting, you should probably be a pretty damn good accountant. Is that what we're talking about?
Oh, that's not what we're talking about. Thanks for playing. No, here's the thing. Let's give a little bit of head nod toward that. If I'm an accountant, I want my boss to understand accounting for sure. I mean, otherwise my boss doesn't have a lot of credibility when it comes to, correcting me or helping me or supporting me. So that's a factor.
I can relate to that.
Yeah, your boss is awesome.
Let's move on.
All right. So here's the thing. Not only do I need to know how to do the job that my employees are doing in most cases, but side note, that's not even required all the time, and we can circle back to that. But here's the thing. When I say skilled managers, I'm talking about managers who have management skills.
Okay, so skilled managers are managers that have management skills.
Yeah.
Go figure.
Well, and here's the thing. Ethan, have you heard of the Peter Principle?
I have heard of the Peter Principle.
I know you have. You've taught this class. So here's the thing, guys. The Peter Principle, it's a little snarky. It can sound a little insulting. I'm not trying to insult anyone out there. But the Peter Principle goes like this. Employees tend to get promoted until they reach their level of incompetence.
So let's go back to that accounting analogy then.
Here we go.
You have someone that is a really good accountant. They're really good at their job. And because they're such a good accountant, they get promoted to manage all the other accountants, right? Because the exact same skills that make you a good accountant are the exact same skills that make you good at leading people.
Absolutely not. And you're exactly right, though. That's what happens. This happens all over the place. It's the Peter Principle is alive and well in most organizations. In fact, I would venture to say probably the vast majority of organizations. To some degree, you're really good at engineering, and so we're going to reward you by making you the lead engineer or making you the manager of the engineers. Because, like Ethan said, the very skills that make you a great engineer automatically make you a great manager. Well, we know that's not true. And here's how it works. You get promoted because you were really good at what you were doing before. Well, now you're in a role where you are impacting way more people than you were impacting before. And you don't actually have the tool belt or the tools to be a good manager. So you're negatively impacting people, which means you're creating a low morale work environment, right? Here's the analogy. It's like saying you're a really good nurse. Starting Monday, you're going to be the surgeon.
Right.
Right? Now, is it possible that nurse watched enough surgeries over the last, 30 years that he or she could actually get in there and do some surgery? Well, yeah. I mean, it's a chance. It's possible. But I'm not going to that hospital.
I mean, that's a big point right there. And again, like you said, this tends to happen in most organizations. Is that correct?
I think it's true.
At some level, someone gets promoted because they're really good at their job with that particular skill that pertains to their job.
Right. Now, there's other organizations. I'll just go one step deeper. It's not quite the Peter Principle, and sadly, this is true. I've worked with a lot of clients whose their method of promoting someone into management actually mostly has to do with their longevity. So now we're not even talking about they were necessarily that good at even the job they were doing before. It's that, they've been here for 20 years and they're the person who's been here the longest. So it's time to promote someone to manager and it's your turn.
Right. And talk about, a morale killer right there.
Yeah.
Someone gets promoted when it's clear and everybody recognizes that they might not be the most skilled person either at that job in particular or even managing people.
That's exactly right. And to me, it's insulting to do either one of those methods, because what that implies is that there is actually not a particular skill set that comes with managing, like anyone, right? You just kind of show up to work. Now you're a manager. Good luck. Welcome to management. That makes no sense, because there's a very specific skill set involved in being the kind of manager that's going to be able to create a high morale workplace.
Yeah, so true. And I said in last episode, I read a stat that 3 out of 4 employees report that their manager is the worst part about their job. And at the same time, a similar report reported that 87% of companies say they don't do an excellent job at developing leaders at all levels. So clearly this is something that organizations are aware of. They're not developing leaders. Do you think it's maybe that they're just not developing the right skills?
I'm glad you mentioned that stat, because you said, I think at the end of the last episode, Ethan, that we were going to be talking this episode about how to raise morale. And you know what? The bottom line really goes right back to what you're getting at here. I think that I can't say most organizations. I just don't know for sure. But say again, I'm sorry. What was the stat just now?
That 87% of companies say they don't do an excellent job at developing leaders at all levels. That was from a Deloitte study.
Yeah. And what I'm seeing, and that actually matches up pretty well with what we're seeing. What we see is everything from organizations who literally do nothing to develop management skills. Like they literally promote somebody into a management role or hire someone in from the outside, and it is almost literally welcome to management. Good luck. There's no training to be a good manager. Certainly no set of skills that we are all signing up for. There's no sense of this is what it looks like to be a manager in this organization. These are the management skills we're going to be evaluating you on. In fact, in many organizations, during their end of the year evaluation, managers are not even evaluated on their management. They're evaluated on the actual work product itself, the same thing they were being evaluated on before.
And you know what that says to me? It says to me that if I was someone within that organization, I would think, all right, this organization doesn't actually care about how we lead and how we manage people. They don't care because they're not choosing to give us the skills.
Yeah.
Or they're saying, hey, now it's your job to go out and figure out the skills. And then all your managers go off and they get their own sets of tools from whatever reading or courses they're doing. And then all the managers come back with different tools, and they're not singing off the same sheet of music.
Exactly. It indicates either, or maybe all of these are true, it indicates a sense of not really caring how managers manage. It might indicate, I think in a lot of cases, just a lack of understanding. What we talked about last episode, I don't think many organizations understand the importance of morale, and they don't understand where morale comes from. They don't realize, and this is what is really sad, if they invested in those managers and got them practicing best practice management skills and had them practicing those skills on the same page with one another, evaluated managers on that, encouraged them on that, it's amazing what they could accomplish in those organizations. Because not only would they bring morale up, they would save themselves tons of money. They would save themselves way more money than they spent in developing those managers.
And so what's the fix? And this is probably going to sound a little self-serving.
Well, there's a couple fixes, and yeah, well, okay, let's start with the self-serving one. Yeah, we do know a consulting firm that could come in and develop your managers. So Managing with Mind and Heart is our foundational management development workshop. It's a 5-day course, and this is not designed to be a commercial. We do want to tell you, though, that we do offer first-year training, which is this 5-day course. We offer a second and a third follow-up year to really create sustainability, et cetera, et cetera. So one of the answers, of course, is to bring in us or any other firm that you connect with and put your managers through a training course. However, can we dig into that a little bit deeper? Because you can do that and still fail.
Absolutely.
Right? You can bring in a management course and you can say, okay, everybody goes to this course, and then that is over and the consulting company takes off, and we as an organization now, as the organization does not practice any kind of sustainability practices, and it becomes flavor of the year, and everyone forgets about it, and everyone goes back to what they were doing before.
So let's make sure we're on the same page here. Managers need management skills.
Absolutely.
They need the same skills as their fellow managers, the same committed practices.
Yep.
And they need to have some sort of program, for lack of a better term, process to sustain them.
Absolutely. Yep. That's the number one thing, right? You've got to get skills to leaders and then maintain those skills over time, which means we need to be that organization needs to become the kind of organization that has an actual established management culture that they're shooting for. These are the behaviors that we expect to see from our managers, and they're going to be trained and encouraged and held accountable to actually delivering those specific management skills. Now, that can happen through, hiring someone like us to come in and move them toward that place. It can also happen, and we've watched a lot of companies over our work with them set this up, a really good onboarding process. And we'll talk more about that, I think, on another podcast, but I do want to say those first 3 months or so, sometimes even 6 months of a manager's new position as a manager, those are really significant months. And there should be a lot of things going on there. Their onboarding should not just be, here's the HR policies and here's your parking pass and, et cetera, et cetera. Your onboarding needs to include, this is exactly what it looks like to be a manager in this organization. And we're going to make sure you have these skills. And to the degree that you don't have these skills, we're no harm, no foul, but we're going to make sure you get them.
And let's be clear here. When I was first understanding these concepts, I thought to myself, oh, great. Okay, so this Peter principle, managers tend to rise to their levels of incompetence. We haven't brought any management training into this organization. I have all these leaders that rose to their level of incompetence without any management skills. They're all screwed. It's like, no, that's not how it works. You can train these people that are already managers, that have been long-term managers. It's not... You don't have to wait till you bring in a new manager to start teaching them these skills. It's like, let's get everybody up to where they need to be, and people can learn these skills.
That's exactly right. In fact, I think that's the vast majority of our work, is we come in and we say, look, to some degree, some of you, let's be honest, have been the victim of the Peter principle. And side note, right? I'm not saying, everyone who gets promoted that doesn't go through management training just sucks at managing, because that's not the case. There's people come in with their own natural abilities and their natural skills and their intuition, et cetera. But at the very least, you probably don't have managers on the same page, right? If you haven't provided some guidance and training, you probably don't have managers managing, like you said, singing off the same sheet of music. So we come in and again, we're not promoting ourselves as much as saying what's going to help an organization be healthy and help their culture improve and help morale be high is, let's take all those managers who are already in place and let's make sure we bring everybody up to this base level of, this is what it looks like to manage.
Exactly. So what are some of these skills then? What are some of the skills that you would say, regardless of what your management team looks like, regardless of their experience level, what are the skills that they should have in order to be able to help with that morale piece, to help raise morale in the organization and sustain it?
Well, that is the question, isn't it? So there's a couple different ways to approach that. One of the sections that we teach during our workshops is called the Top 15 Management Skills. And this is a list of 15 things that, when we really dug into the research, including the big Gallup study that we described a little bit in our last episode, this is from the First Break All the Rules book. This was a really big Gallup study, 100 and something thousand groups and organizations over a 10-year period. We took that study, we folded into that some other research. We came up with these 15 things that we really do believe it's important that managers have these skills. Let's go ahead and list them, but we actually will cover a lot of these, if probably most of them, probably all of them, in the next many, many podcasts.
And if you don't mind, even before we start getting into these top 15-minute... English is hard sometimes.
Yes, it is, Ethan.
The top 15 management skills, even before that, what would be some of the consequences of, say, for instance, you have a team of skilled managers, just for the sake of an argument, but they were all practicing different skills. I mean, what type of consequences could that have on a team in an organization?
Yeah, that's a good point. Let's take that side trip because first of all, a little bit of an analogy here. My previous career was social work, and we'll probably be talking more about that in other podcasts. But I can't tell you how many times I had the phone call from a parent. Hey, can you come in and fix the kids? Right. And we never had seminars for the kids. What we did was we went in and we worked with parents. And the two things primarily we were trying to do is, number one, make sure those parents are practicing good parenting skills, right? And there's the analogy to management skills. But we also want to make sure those parents are on the same page, that they're practicing those parenting skills in concert with one another. So it's not contradictory skills or confusing for the kids. I guess there'd be a third thing too. We also want mom and dad to be, in a two-parent family, getting along with each other, right? So there's another analogy. We want to make sure that managers are not just on the same page practically, but are on the same page in terms of relationally, that they're treating each other well, not talking behind each other's backs, et cetera, et cetera. But back to your question, I digress. Results when managers are managing fairly well, but completely on different pages. You get a lot of the assumption or the impression of favoritism and inequality. You have employees that seem like they're not being held accountable, which lowers the morale for other employees because managers have very different standards. We certainly have conflicts between organizational, what we call silos or departments, right? Conflicts, roadblocks, etc. We get morale problems because there's such different messages coming down from on top. Now, one of the reasons we get that, one of the reasons organizations come into that or get into that kind of a situation is because they're trying to do management training, but the way they do it, and Ethan, I think you kind of alluded to this earlier, they send their managers out to random trainings. And these managers go out and learn a bunch of good stuff and come back, but they're all doing different things.
Which, by the way, good for the organization. Their heart is in the right place there. They want to get their leaders training. So it's not a knock on them. I think it's just really a misunderstanding of what is going to give you the biggest bang for your buck in terms of morale and employee engagement and management team that are acting as a team.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, if you want to break this down to its simplest way of saying this, if you want high morale in your workplace, you're going to do what you need to do to make sure your managers are, number one, practicing best practice management skills. Number two, practicing the same management skills, roughly. And number three, that your managers treat each other with respect.
Exactly. Quick analogy here. I actually remember as a kid going to you, and you were thinking,
here we go.
You were thinking my bedtime was like 9 o'clock, and so you would say, "Oh yeah, you can stay up for another hour," and then I would go to mom, and she would have thought my bedtime was like 10 o'clock, and so she would say, "Oh, you can stay up for another 2 hours." So that's a pretty silly and stupid analogy of the parenting, but that's kind of how it might work if you have two managers singing off a different page of music. I mean, you can probably think of a better example than that, but that was the one.
I recall in both cases, though, you would just argue either way, right? It didn't matter what I said or mom said. You'd still argue.
Right, yeah, and that was a morale issue for sure. Anyways, these top 15 management skills, let's get into those. You mentioned that one of the key components here is making sure managers are practicing the right skills and practicing them together. So we're going to talk about our top 15 management skills or just briefly go over them. So what you're saying is there's only 15 skills that managers need to have in order to be successful. Do tell more.
Oh, that sounded snarky and a bit of a challenge. The top 50 management skills, I think some of them are broad enough that they encompass lots of bullet points. I actually really do think you could fit all the important required management skills under these 15 headings. So let's go through them. But here's the thing. We'll just say this to our listeners. We will probably most likely dedicate an episode to every one of these over the next
we will.
year or so.
These are important enough in and of themselves to have a full half an hour at least for each one.
I agree.
So let's give the kind of the Reader's Digest version of each and go through them.
All right. The number one, now these are not in order in terms of importance. They're not weighted that way other than number one. I got to tell you that. At the top of the list in all the research is something that sounds pretty close to this, depending on the research you're looking at. Leaders will show caring and respect. And again, we're not going to dive into these so much, but I do want to say that first one is, I'll tell you, I had this participant in class come up to me one time, and he said after the class, he goes, "Hey, I was really enjoyed that top 15 management segment we did today. It was actually really encouraging to me," he said, "because I figure I pretty much have all those, except I just don't have the first one." And I said, "Sorry, dude, it's not going to work. You can actually not have a few of these skills and probably do okay, but not this one. You've got to have this one." And here's the thing. If employees don't believe that you have their best interests at heart, if they actually don't believe that you care about them in that sense, and by care, right, we don't mean your best friends, we don't mean you're going to go barbecuing with them on the weekends, we just mean that they can tell that you have their best interests at heart. And if they don't think that's true, they're going to have a bit of a fear because of the power differential that's between you and that manager. So yeah, showing caring and respect is number
absolutely.
one.
And I mean, you can even look at that through an evolutionary lens of if you are in a group or in a tribe and you recognized that people in that tribe, or say the leader of that tribe, did not care for you, did not respect you, you're in trouble. You are going to be ostracized. You're going to be kicked out of the tribe, and you're probably not going to survive.
Yep.
So remember, this whole idea of working in offices for 8 to 10 hours a day is a pretty new thing in terms of the evolutionary timeline. And so our brains, as employees or whoever, go into that fear mode when we recognize that, oh, our boss, they actually don't have our best interests in mind. They don't care about us. They don't respect us.
That's scary.
Our brains go into fear mode, amygdala takeover.
That's exactly right. And we're going to actually do another, we're going to do one of our podcast episode on what's called the power differential. And that's going to come up real soon because we're going to be talking about that power that exists between managers and employees and how that's perceived by the employee. So
yeah, this concept will make a little bit more sense in that episode. So the second one, we got 15 to get through here. The second one is advocate for your employees.
Absolutely.
You stand up for your group. You go to bat for them.
Absolutely. And what we'll discover in another episode is that we can over-advocate for them accidentally. We can under-advocate. In fact, we have to advocate for them and for our company, which is a really hard line to find. But yeah, number 2 is advocate for your people.
There's a lot of nuances there. So again, we're just going to go through these briefly. What's the third?
Number 3 is communicate. And I got to tell you right now that I have seen, I'm going to say 100, but that might be I do exaggerate. Did you know that, Ethan? And I ever so often I exaggerate.
Oh, not at all. And I'm never sarcastic.
All right. So here we go. Communication. I have seen, I'm going to say 100 employee surveys, official end of the year employee surveys. And I'm going to say 95 of them, in the top 3 needs improvements is communication. I don't have enough information. Management holds their information too close to the chest. So communication, just as a side note there, we'll talk more about this, right? Meetings, how to have a great meeting, how to run a great meeting, how to use and not use email, how to do information distribution.
Yeah, communication is a huge bucket there. So there's definitely a lot to go over at a later time. Number 4, be fair and equitable.
Absolutely. Here's a preview on that one. I believe that when employees complain about their boss showing favoritism, I believe that 20% of the time-ish, it's true. Bosses are actually showing favoritism, mostly on accident, and we'll talk more about that.
And 80% of the time, they're liars.
80% of the time, they are perceiving something as favoritism, but it actually isn't favoritism, and we will talk at a later date on how to fix that.
Okay, so be fair, equitable. Number 5,
involve your employees in decisions. We are going to be introducing to you, our listeners, 6 different ways to decide. It's a range of decision-making styles, And the idea is you want to use all or most of these different styles at various times so that you can find the right balance. But yeah, employees need to have a voice. They need to know they're being heard. And so their opportunities to sound in on decisions is key to their morale.
Yeah. And again, we'll talk more about that. It's not just employees feel like they're being heard, but also feel like what they're saying really matters.
Right. Their opinions get actually incorporated even.
When they can.
When management can, we incorporate employees' opinions. We have lots of stories to tell you on that one.
Number 6, give people autonomy and trust. So this is all about ownership. Last episode, I talked about that customer service group that basically got complete autonomy over how they handled customer service issues. I think it was something like if the fix required anything under $1,000, they had the authority to go make those changes or do whatever they pleased. That's what we're talking about with autonomy and trust, at least at one level.
Yeah, we're going to have several stories for you about organizations that have found some really cool ways to give autonomy.
Number 7.
Yeah, number 7 is ask for feedback. Ask for and be open to feedback. And this is a really important preview here because in few episodes from now, we're going to be digging into emotional IQ. One of the more important components of emotional IQ is my ability to receive feedback from you without being defensive. Because if you get up the guts to give me feedback and I punish you by being defensive,
not doing that again.
You're not going to touch that hot stove again, right? So this skill is not just asking for feedback. Well, it's not just being open to feedback, like being non-defensive. It also means go get feedback. And by feedback, we don't mean asking about an idea that you have, because we just covered that in the decision-making piece. We mean, what would you like to see more of or less of from me as a manager? That kind of feedback.
And by the way, when you close off that feedback channel, you are not going to be able to hear the truth, and therefore you're not going to be able to make the changes it's going to require for you to be a better manager, raise morale in the workplace, and a whole plethora of other things.
Exactly.
Number 8, deal with issues, fix the problems.
Yeah, that seems like a pretty basic thing, but it shows up in the research because really, I mean, when you ask an employee, why do they have a boss? One of the number one things they're going to say is fix things, right? Help me with the roadblocks, the things that are getting in our way.
Number 9,
be approachable. And, all we're going to say on this one right now is there is a lot of emotional IQ involved with being approachable, right? This is everything from knowing how to listen so people feel heard, receiving feedback non-defensively, just bringing a positive vibe to the workplace, right? So, yeah. Number 9 is be approachable.
Yeah, and by the way, like we said, in the next few episodes, we're going to be talking about the power differential. This will come up again.
Yes.
Number 10 is give recognition and thanks, which, believe it or not, can be hard for people at times. It was actually hard for me pretty early on in my career.
Yep. There's a kind of behavior style out there, and we'll be talking about behavior styles later, but there's one particular behavior style that errs toward, hey, honey, I told you I loved you when I married you. I'll let you know if I change my mind. Do we need to keep rehashing this?
Right. Anyways, thank you for that.
Anyways, that was really dismissive, Ethan.
Yeah, I know.
Anyways.
Number 11, hold people accountable.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, if I'm working with somebody who has been misbehaving, who has been treating me poorly, who's a slacker, and no one is doing anything about that, that is going to impact my morale.
Number 12, be available and responsive, right? This is returning emails, returning calls. This is what we call engaging in managing by walking around.
Yes, MBWA, management by walking around. Show up, be available, get back to people, etc. Number 13, follow through and follow up. Lots to say here, of course. We'll wait on this one, but it's one of the primary ways that we build trust as a manager is we get back to people when we said we were going to. We follow through on things. Unfortunately, it's probably one of the number one ways we can destroy trust over time by not following through, not following up.
And number 14, we're getting close here to the end. Make your expectations clear. And that seems fairly self-explanatory, although there is some nuances with that as well.
There really is. And when we get to that one, we'll discover that there's often miscommunication and lack of communication around really what is it that's expected from me. And that includes things like even autonomy. Was this mine to take care of? Was it yours to take care of, etc.?
The final one, number 15, is provide resources and training, including leadership development.
Absolutely. Make sure your people are equipped. Make sure they have what they need. So these are 15 things that each one of them has, several bullets. But these are those things that research tells us that your employees need from you if they're going to be part of a high morale work environment.
Now, when I look at these top 15 management skills, I think to myself, oh, shit, I have a long way to go. And I know I'm not the only one because I've been in classes teaching managers where I get that exact same look, or even they verbally say that to me. It's like, okay, well, sure, I have the first one. I'm pretty good at showing respect to people and caring for people, but I'm really bad at following up and following through. I've been told I do not make expectations clear.
Yeah, or we're going through the list and they have that look in their face, and when you dig in, you find out it's because they can come up with at least one failure for every single one of these things. So they sit there and start getting discouraged, right? And we have to jump in and say, no, look, this is the ideal, right? Nobody's going to measure up to this list every day, every month, every year, right? But we're growing toward these things. We're training as managers. We're being trained. We're practicing. We're apologizing when we mess up. I'll tell you what, an employee can tell, and this is actually what's key. They can tell when they have a manager who is striving to be a good manager, who's working on these skills, and that really does carry the day right there.
Right. I really think that nobody is ever going to be perfect at these top 15 skills.
Well, I'm pretty close, I'd say.
Okay, well, we'll talk about that off air. But the reality is, we just need to be taking steps in the right direction to get better at these. Nobody's going to expect you to be perfect at all these, but the idea is to have these on your radar. When you have these on your radar, that's a really good starting point for raising morale, for becoming a better leader, for gaining more trust and respect with your employees. This is really the starting point here.
It is. And an organization, let's kind of circle back to our topic and kind of start wrapping up here. We are talking about how to build and maintain morale. The bottom line is, let's say it again, skilled management equals high morale, which equals all that cool stuff that you cannot pay for and you can't punish for. So an organization, it behooves an organization to train their managers in these skills and find ways to support them in this growth, evaluate them on this, encourage them on this, and just make sure it's clear that if you're going to be a manager in this organization, this is what we're shooting for. This is what it looks like to be a manager.
Absolutely. Anything else you want to say here on this topic? We're gonna wrap up here. And again, in the next couple episodes, we are going to dissect a few more of these concepts.
No, that's a good way to finish this. We do have a couple things we want to just mention at the end of our episodes here. First of all, we really would like to hear from you. So we encourage you. Ethan's going to give you the email address here in a minute. But email us when you have a question, when you have a topic you'd like us to spend some time on, when you have a situation you'd like to bounce off us, when you just want to tell us that we rock, whatever.
Or that we suck. That's fine too. We'll take feedback. We're pretty good at that.
Delete.
Anyways, email me. Email Ethan at nashconsulting.com, ETHAN at nashconsulting.com. You know, when we are teaching our classes, we get to answer questions from our attendees. Well, we don't get that opportunity here at the podcast unless you email us. So please do, Ethan at nashconsulting.com. We will answer your questions.
Yep. And the second thing, last thing, is we want to just make sure you're aware of a really cool opportunity coming up in November. So Leading from Within, a 3-day journey toward leadership greatness. It's going to be offered November 5th through 7th. We're out of time. I won't get into the details right now, but go to nashconsulting.com and check it out under coming events.
It'll be a great time. That's it, folks, for this episode of the Managing with Mind and Heart podcast. Hopefully we helped some managers suck a little bit less today.
Awesome.
All right. next time, ladies and germs.